everybody, and welcome to episode 44 of All About African Violets. All About African Violets is musically sponsored by Ted Yoder. You can hear and purchase his great music on his website at tedyoder.com. It's also available from iTunes. And you guys, you might want to check his website. He's doing some interesting new things. And doing some recording live out in nature, and some of that's available for you to listen to on his website, so check it out. Welcome to my sunroom. Come on in, have a seat, relax. I'm really happy to see you guys this week. It has been quite a week. Do I say that every week? I think I do. I'm grateful that I have such a wonderful and interesting life. I really am. It was my birthday this week, and many of you sent me wishes, happy wishes on Facebook. So thank you very much. That was very much appreciated. And I did have a very lovely week. I did have one wacky thing happen, and it has nothing to do with African Violets, but I'm going to share it here because there are a lot of you who watch the podcast every week. And some of you, or someone of you, might have an answer to my question. I have a question for you guys. I charred something in the microwave. Oh my goodness, it was bad. And I don't know, I might have mentioned this last week because now it's been probably almost a week since I did it. But I'm like I said, I might have mentioned it, but the smell, I can't get rid of the smell out of the microwave. It took a couple of days to get the smoke smell out of my house. Thankfully, nothing caught on fire. I'm very surprised my smoke alarm did not go off, but I can't get the smell out. And so if anyone knows how to get the smoke smell out of a microwave, I would be very happy to hear how you might do it. I've tried vinegar. I've wiped it down with vinegar. I've boiled water and vinegar in it to let it steam. I've boiled water with cinnamon sticks and vanilla in it. Now it just smells like charred sugar and cinnamon. I mean, it works. And the food that you heat up in it, which is pretty much all I use it for, the food doesn't smell charred when it comes out, but it's just gross. So if anyone knows how to fix that, please leave me a message on a comment on the website. Let's get talking about African Violets. Sorry, I've got a lot to talk to you guys about today because it's question day. Okay, but before we get to the questions, sorry, a little editing here, actually, what I did was I have already answered all the questions, and I just sat here for more than an hour on camera. So I am going to have to split these up. So you're going to hear little references to, oh, I might have to split this up. Well, I realized that I had to split it up because there's no way that I could get all this in. I mean, you'd be sitting here for 2 hours watching the podcast. That's not the point. So, you're going to hear some questions here. We're going to go right into them, and I will space these out over the next week, maybe 2 weeks, because you guys asked awesome questions this week. So without further ado, let's go to the first question. So let's go right into tips and treasures, and we are going to talk about questions. And so I'm going to be a talking head again this week, but you guys left me some wonderful questions, so thank you, and I'm going to try to answer as many of them as I can. So first, and so I don't have my iPad today because I just printed all this out, so I've got pieces of paper all over here everywhere. But I wanted to start with, there were some hybridizing questions, and the first one was, what does it take to hybridize? Can I take my no ID violets and cross them and ultimately register them as my own hybrids? Or would I have to start with named plants before crossing? And my guess on that one was that yes, you could use them unless they were a copyright protected plant, but I didn't really know for sure. So I sent an email to Dr. Jeff Smith, and he said, he's so great. He responded and said, hybridizing can be done with any 2 plants that you want. They can be no ID plants, but it is probably easier to work with named cultivars if your eventual intentions are to register any offspring. Actually, hybridizers work with no IDs all the time, their own seedlings. So when it's a seedling, it still is a no ID. So if you have an unregistered F1 seedling and you use it in a cross, it is a no ID. In these cases, I often give the heritage of the seedling in the registration papers, although I have never been told that it is required. For example, I might say that the pollen parent of an F1 seedling of yesterday's shadow crossed with yesterday's child, while the seed parent was an F1 of yesterday's child crossed with tomorrow's snowy night. To me, that gives more information about the cross for the registration of the plant. This is pretty technical stuff, guys. And if it does not make sense to you, leave me a message and I will ask Dr. Jeff Smith to explain this even further for us, okay? And this is very interesting because he said, actually, because I thought maybe plants that had, were under a copyright or patent. He said, actually, patented plants can be used for hybridizing. The patents only protect the plant from asexual reproduction, which is a leaf cutting or a stem tip cutting. So it doesn't protect them from sexual reproduction. So patented plants are fair game for hybridizing. So I hope that answers your question. And next, I had a question here from Robin, and she said that last week, when you guys met Dale Martins, she said that she really enjoyed that, but she thought that chimeras were sterile, and so she was very interested to hear that Dale had used one in her hybridizing. And so she said, did she use it as a pollen or a seed plant? And so I left her a message on the website and said I would check with Dale. And Dale said, in the case of Heartland's Lime Sherbet, the seed parent was the chimera, so she used it as a seed parent. But I could easily have used the chimera as the pollen parent. Chimera flowers are not sterile. They have normal female and male organs. In fact, I have selfed the Japanese chimera, Yukako. If some of you have seen Yukako, it's purple and green. It's very, very different looking. It's very beautiful. A number of years ago, it was all the rage at the National Convention. But so she has selfed that, and the result was 9 out of 10 flowers having a lot of green coloration. Heartland's Lime Bubbles, which has been entered in a couple of convention shows, was the selfing of Yukako. So she has a picture of it here. I'm going to fold it over so you don't see all my notes. But this is Heartland's Lime Bubbles. Very interesting, very different plant. So again, another interesting question about chimeras and about hybridizing, that they are not sterile. So yay, rock on. You could use them in your program, Robin, if you're hybridizing. Well, those were the 2 things that I had gotten from you guys about hybridizing, but I got a lot of questions about just growing. And the first one is from my friend Julie. Hi, Julie. She says, she has 2 questions. She says, I have 2 questions for you. I know they have been spoken about before, but I am still learning and I need to hear it again. And then she says, hello, my name is Julie and I am an overwaterer. So she says, I've rooted beautiful babies, nursed them into their second potting, and then boom, they melted. I now know that I overwatered them. What is the best way to water? How often? And especially, how do you water the babies? So these are great questions, Julie. And I think, first of all, you need, the thing that I would suggest that you look at is how heavy your soil mix is. How much perlite are you cutting it with? I use the same mix for my plants that I use to pot babies, to put leaves down and pot babies up. I used to initially use a mix that was perlite and vermiculite, I think, and I mean, it was a different mix, but I tried it then, but it was kind of a pain in the neck to have two different things. So I tried putting down leaves years ago, just using the mix that I use for my plants, and it worked just fine. So that's what I use. For certain plants, and if you are wick watering, you definitely need to cut your peat mix with more perlite. For Streptocarpus plants, I also cut with more perlite, more rather than less. And I think on my website, on my blog, my personal blog, I have some photos of that, of how the mix looks out of the bag and how it looks. You know, I took a couple of photos. This is a number of years ago. I will look for that and try to link to it for you in the show notes. But something also to recall is, and I don't know if this demonstration is going to work or not, because I'm sitting here in the sunroom with this is a dry old sponge, all right, and this is a Rubbermaid bowl full of water. So I'm going to stick the sponge in here, and it is sucking up the water. All right, so now it's kind of a fat old sponge, and it's full of water. And as I'm holding this in my hands, and this is why I'm showing this to you, you can see the water is just dripping out the bottom. Now, if we squeeze this sponge out, I think must have had some soap in it. Got some soap bubbles in the water now. And now I just got water on my face. Now it's still moist, but there's no water hanging out the bottom. It's not heavy anymore, full of water. Let me just show you again. When you do this, when you pick it up, you're going to feel that the sponge itself is heavy. It's got water. We're going to squeeze all the water out of this sponge and the soap bubbles. And now we have a very lightweight but moist sponge. This is how your plant medium should feel, like a wrung out sponge. All right, so it's damp, but it's not wet. So I'm going to put this down on the ground and hope I don't kick it over. I'll be right back. Hang on. Get down there. There we go. All right, now my hand's wet. All right. Anyway, it should, if the top, I use my little finger, like the side of my little finger, kind of stick it on the top of the plant to feel the water and to feel the soil, I mean. And if it's really wet, they don't need another drink. And if it's moist, it's probably just about right. And if it's dry, then they need a drink. So this is, again, I used to have trouble when I was a new grower. I had a tendency to pot, when I was potting onto the next size of pot, I would pot the plant a little too low in the pot, so there was more of a, and then I'd get the dirt kind of high up around the crown of the plant there, and the base of the leaves, I mean, and I would have trouble with rotting and things, doing that. So make sure you're potting high enough in the pot so that it's not stuck way down in there, and just watch your water. This is also one of the reasons that I use that modified Texas style of potting, which you can find in Growing to Show, in Pauline Bartholomew's book Growing to Show, and also in her book. There are all the different methods of watering. Julie, you asked about different methods. There's bottom watering, there's top watering, there's wick watering, there's mat watering, there's Texas style watering, there's self-watering pots. I mean, there are a ton of different choices. And I think it's just best for me, it was best to go simple. Initially, I just saucer watered, bottom watered, and I never put a wick in. And then I started doing the modified Texas style of potting, which you can see here. This is Texas style. This pot has the holes in it for Texas style. I just do it without adding the holes. But I use perlite, a good layer of perlite in the bottom of my pots, and I use a wick. So even each of my plants is generally on its own saucer. I personally don't choose to mat or community water, tray water, except for leaves and little babies for a little while. But I generally don't do that, and that's a personal choice. We've talked about that on the podcast before, as you mentioned. And I'll try to see if I can pinpoint which episodes we talked about that on. I'll try to look through the list that I have there for you, the index. But you can get info here of different methods to try. Again, for me, it just worked really well to do it simply. I don't grow that many plants because I don't grow. Let me rephrase that. I don't grow hundreds of plants. In which, if I did, then community watering, tray watering, mat watering, that becomes almost a necessity to be able to keep up with that many plants. Also, in Joyce and Kent's book, You Can Grow African Violets, the second chapter is all about water, the essential growing factor. So, and they talk, wet enough but not too damp, that's the sponge. She talks about wick watering, capillary matting, Texas style potting. All of this, they cover this as well. So again, books, I've got more books to share with you today. And I don't know if I'm going to get through all the questions because they're all so good. So we may have an extra week of questions next week, guys, but I will get through as many of them as I can today. But Julie, I hope that at least gets you started and that it's helpful. And one of the things I did this week is I talked with Joyce Stork before the podcast, and I ran a lot of the questions by her because she's so great. She always sends me an email and says, I'm talked back to the podcast because I want to add something to what you said, Annie. So last week she wanted to add, because we had a question about, big heads of bloom, and did that cause a problem for the leaves or the crown? And one of the things she wanted to add was when a plant is really trying to bloom, it needs more water. And anytime I talk to Joyce, I always learn something new because I sort of instinctually put my show plants on reservoirs about 6 weeks out from show, as you will see on the look at what's on the stands this week. And I thought, gosh, I just do that, having learned how to do that, I guess, never realizing I was doing it for the real reason, obviously, that they're trying to bloom, they need more water. So what I did this week was I checked in with her first on these, and I said, this is how I'm going to answer this question. Do you have anything to add? She said, for this one, she says, a lot of overwaterers water from the bottom, filling the saucer, and then walking away. The plants end up sitting in a water-filled saucer for too long, and on top of that, they often allow the plants to get too dry in between watering, and then they give the plant too much water to compensate, which you guys, you've seen the results of that for me with minis and semis, where of course temperature was involved, I think, as well for them, but where I let them dry out just a little too much, and then I gave them a good drink of water, and they just went, ugh. So, and again, this happens for me with minis and semis much more frequently. I mean, I can't even remember the last time that's ever happened for me with standard. But so this is a very good point. And she says, I'm not sure. This is the other thing she says is, I'm not sure you'll be able to help her until you know exactly what she's been doing. And so Julie, if you want to get in touch with me and let me know exactly how you're watering, I'll see if I can, impart any wisdom. Cross your fingers. Well, and then what Joyce says about Kent in the store and their plants, she says, we individually water the starter plants and drain the tray. So they're in a tray and they water each one and then they drain the tray. And then she said, just because setting them up for wick watering is too labor intensive. But guys, we're talking, they have entire trays of starter plants that that Kent takes to show to sell. So she says when they go into 4-inch pots, we insert the wick and they are put on either a wicking reservoir or capillary matting from there on. So they do use some community watering. That's what capillary matting is. That's plants share that mat. And they use reservoirs. And I wonder if that's how Kent gets his plants to be so large. I wonder, I might have to do an experiment, guys, and start putting some of my plants on reservoirs all the time and see what happens. That might be a very good experiment. Well, that was a really long first question, but watering is critical. It really is. So I hope that was helpful. And Julie had a second question. She says it's about fertilizer. She said, I've heard way too many options on this subject. Organic, chemical, it is all confusing me. Currently, I am using Jack's 20-20-20, but then I read it had bad salts in it. And what about using one with a bloom booster? Thank you for any info you might share. Okay, there's a couple of things with fertilizer. First, if you are repotting on a regular basis, and for minis and semis, that's every 3 to 4 months, and for standards, it's at least every 6 months. If you are repotting regularly, you shouldn't have to worry too much about the salts in the fertilizer. I do use a fertilizer that the nitrogen comes not from urea. That's the big question, is if there's urea in the fertilizer, is that going to hurt my plants? Well, way back in the day, people used, garden soil and other mixes, things that had bugs and microorganisms and stuff that would allow that urea to break down in the mix and be then accessible for the plant to use well. But because almost all of us as African violet growers, almost everyone uses a soilless mix. That's what we get. It looks like dirt. I call it dirt. I try to call it potting mix or potting medium, but I often call it dirt. It's not dirt, it's peat. And it does not have those bugs and worms and microorganisms and stuff in it that could break that urea down. So I believe that is where that caution came from. The fertilizer I use is Optimara, and I think it's 14-12-14, which is very similar to 20-20-20. That's a balanced fertilizer. That's a great choice. You can read, there are many different types of fertilizer. Just read the labels. You will see if it says that it has a lot of urea, it has a little, it has none, and you can then maybe test some out. I have tested other fertilizers over time. The one I like best is the one I use. Now, many growers switch their fertilizer from week to week. So, 1 week they'll use this, another week they'll use fish emulsion, another week they'll use something completely different, another week they'll just use plain water. You heard Dale last week say that she leaches her plants regularly. So it's different for every grower. This is one of the things I love about our plants, is there are so many ways to grow them and to work with them, and you can try them and experiment with them and find out what works well for you. I can tell you what works well for me is the Optimara fertilizer that I use, and I believe I got it in a 1-pound tub from Cape Cod Violetry, and then I use a 1/4 of a teaspoon a gallon. Some people use 1/8 of a teaspoon. Some people, again, you can try, you can experiment. Some people never use a bloom booster. You heard Dale last week say that she never uses a bloom booster, or she calls it high bloom. She just doesn't use it, and she uses less fertilizer than I do. So, and her plants are gorgeous as well. There's so many things. I'm getting all excited. Calm myself down. So I do use a bloom booster occasionally. The only time I use it is for a couple of weeks when I have my plants Pauline Bartholomew's pre-show schedule, getting ready for show. So I tried a new bloom booster this year called Open Sesame. I was given a sample of it by a friend of mine. It came in the box of joy, and I thought, well, I'm going to give it a try for this one. We'll see how they do. So it can be confusing, Julie, but I would suggest that maybe you start with a simple balanced one. You got the jacks. Go with that for a while and see if you like it. And then if you want to try a different one, pick a couple of plants and try it on a few plants first. Always try things on one or two plants that you will that you feel that you could stand to lose, that your heart will not be broken if you lose it, because I have made the mistake of doing something and doing it on the entire collection. This is never a good idea. Oh, never. Well, I got through 2 questions. You guys, there's just so much. Julie, they were great questions, and there's so much to learn about both of those topics. So if your question was not answered today, please keep tuning in, because I have split the footage up, and you will get an answer to your question. If it's something that is an urgent question, please feel free to contact me on Facebook or leave a message on the website, and I'll see if I can answer for you more quickly. But this episode is even so going to be a little bit longer than usual, but I hope you'll enjoy it. So it's time to take a look at what's on the stands. So I'll see you on the other side. Good morning, everybody. We're here in the guest room taking a look at what's on the stands. These are the show hopefuls for National. We're about 5.5 weeks out, and you'll notice that I've put them on reservoirs, and you will also notice that some of them, Pixie Blue and Rob's Taruka, are already trying to bloom. So I'm letting them go, and some of those blossoms will likely have to come off, but we'll see how they do in the next month or so here. And I had a question this week about, people noticed that I was turning the plants, and I want that, you don't have to overthink that one. I don't know, you see here my light tubes. I have one here and one here. I have a 2-tube fixture, and this is a 24-inch one. So this is one of my 2x2 stands, 2 foot by 2 foot stands. So as a plant is sitting here, this is Optimara Little Azurite. Can you tell that it's kind of growing this way? So it's reaching up toward that light. So as you look at it, you can see now that I'm turning it, and the part that was leaning up is now going to start to lean over this way. So now, right now, it's facing that way, and we want it to face. It's just a very simple, sometimes just a quarter or a half a turn. We'll do it with this one too, so that the crown of the plant, remember the crown right in the middle, remains even and grows evenly. Same thing here. And in a week's time, these guys, even the ones that are in the center here, this one is growing a little bit this way. So I'm just going to give it a little turn so that it just stays a little more centered. Let's take a look down here. Second shelf. Oh, here. There's a little bloom on Pixie Blue. Thought you might want to see it. Same thing happening down here. Here is Fisherman's Paradise, which needs to be repotted. And, oops, sorry. You don't really need to see her there. You need to see here. Just a little turn. This is just kind of a matter of course. You can see all the plant saucers sitting here from the ones I put on the reservoirs. Same thing here. You see that this one is leaning toward the light. So just give it a little turn just to keep it even. Same thing here. So the longer you grow, the more you will see how this goes and get used to it. Oh, what's going on here? We got some leaves that have to come off. Oh, this is a trailer that I took the center out of, and it doesn't seem too happy. Doesn't seem like it wants to trail, and it lost a couple leaves. Well, we'll give it a turn and let it go and see how it does. All right, let's head over here. We're on the bottom shelf. Oh, House of Amani is blooming. Isn't it cute? I think it looks a little blue, at least on the monitor as I am looking at it here, filming it, but it is a really pretty deep lavender. And here's one last look at the second shelf. Plants that need a little turn. Plants that need to be potted up. Let's go take a look in the basement. Well, here we are downstairs in the basement, and this plant that is blooming is Fisherman's Paradise, and this is the deepest purple I have personally ever seen on Fisherman's Paradise. It is kind of consistently cooler down here in the basement right now, so that is probably why, because cooler temperatures can increase the intensity of the color of the blossom. Got some others here who are wanting to bloom, need a little hand. I think, what is this one? This is, yikes, I gotta pick it up. Oh, this is Starry Night Blue. Wants to bloom again. I need to pot that one on. And Buckeye Lost Love is trying to bloom here as well. That is A. John's Winter Sun, the one that sported. Quick look here in the dome. Looking kind of wet in there. I watered yesterday. Might have watered a little too much. But everybody's got a buffer between the water and the dirt, so they all have wicks and they all have coarse perlite in the bottom of the pot. And here are our show plants just hanging out. Really liking how this is Optimara, Michigan, I think. Let me take a quick look. Yeah, Optimara, Michigan. This is going to grow to be a great plant, and if I can get it to have a really good head of bloom on it, I'm going to be really pleased. Here's Roulette, also looking pretty good. Here's our trailers, both of which trying to bloom again. And I'm not seeing, oh, here's something that needs to come off a Western Moon, a little blossom, trying to bloom. I'm not seeing anything really, I'm keeping an eye on these. Let's walk around. Woo! To the other side. Get a closer look here. And I'm taking some more blossoms off of Western Moon that I always want to call Winter Moon. Maybe someone will name a plant Winter Moon and I can grow it. Here's Optimara, Ontario. Everybody looking pretty good. Okay, let's walk over here at my charming but dirty basement. Well, it's just not really dirty, it's just a basement. And here are the Streptocarpus hanging out, Blue Mars, Midnight Flame, getting ready to bloom. Can't wait for you to see that one. This is Dale's Polar Berry. Again, getting ready to bloom. And here is White Gold, already blooming. Yippee! Salmon Sunset, getting ready to bloom. Dancing Trail, still trying to, have a little comeback from the Marathon that I put in the soil. I do not think that it likes it. I may just put some leaves down of this one and start over. And here's Chiffon Masquerade. Let's go upstairs. Things are getting crowded on the shelf in the kitchen. Oh my goodness, I've got some work cut out for me here, you guys. Everything is looking good. It must warmer 10. Okay, here you can really see it, that this is leaning toward the light. Gonna turn it. Gotta do it. This is Jersey Snowflakes. Really pretty little single white. And the blossoms are holding on. They really look pretty good. I'm really pleased with this. It's sometimes challenging to get a good white violet, so I'm loving that one. Up to our little Wichita girl, blooming beautifully. Okay, you can see it here. Do you see that this is in the corner of the shelf closest to me, and the light is right up here, but it's leaning toward that tube. It's about, the tube is here, and the plant is here. So it's just a little turn, just to keep it growing. Yeah, here's the Gesneriad shelf. Okay, these are the pieces I put down last week. Can you see that they're already rooting there in the water of the calumnias? One here, this one trying to bloom under the Apollo there, and also here, rooting, looking great. And here's, you know what, guys, I'm really disappointed with this Moonlit Velvet. It's such a beautiful blossom on the strap, but you only get one a stalk, and they don't last. They just fall right off. That's bothersome to me. Here's Escananthus abconicus. I have to start cutting this back. I need some grooming here and some repotting of my Texas hot chili, but it's looking pretty good. And here's the top shelf, again from the other side, so you can get a good look. This is supposed to be Sassy Sister, and this is so funny. This is the story of my life. Irish Flirt and Sassy Sister are sisters. And sometimes a leaf from an Irish Flirt plant will produce a Sassy Sister. That's the pinkish one instead of the white and green one. Well, I really like Sassy Sister, and Irish Flirt not so much. So I had a leaf of Sassy Sister, and I gotta tell you, from these buds, it looks like once again I have Irish Flirt here. Which is just hilarious because I keep trying to grow Sassy Sister. Let's go take a look at the big box violet. Oh, here she is, beautiful, blooming. These are a deep pink, got a little bit of coral shading to them. This is a really lovely plant. And I gotta say, it's blooming quite well. And it's quite happy just hanging out here in the open conservatory stand in the sunroom in an east window. All right, that's the look at what's on the stands this week. I'll be right back. Can you believe the big box violet? I mean, really. You know, one of the questions, and Joyce talked about this in her response, and you'll hear it, you know, in a subsequent episode. She talked about the big box violet as being a good example of growing, everyday growing, not growing for show, just growing a plant in your home. You know, the big box violet lives, I repot it every 6 months. I use that commercial mix on it, and it lives in an open conservatory stand in the east window of my sunroom. And it's just doing its thing. I let it bloom when it wants to bloom. I don't force it or try to grow to show for it to grow to show. I groom it, I turn it, I fuss with it a little bit, not much. And I'm looking at it, I just looked over at it. It's beautiful. So, and that's been like the best experiment ever. So anyway, it's time to get the bail money ready. So again, this is the season, folks. There is a display, a sale, and an educational exhibit. The Glenview North Shore African Violet Society is doing that on May 4th and May 5th at the Chicago Botanic Garden in Glencoe, Illinois. The Oshkosh Violet Society in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. I'm sorry, the phone just rang. Hang on, I'll be right back. There's never a dull moment around this joint. I'm sorry about that. We were talking about Oshkosh, Wisconsin. I like saying that, Oshkosh, Wisconsin. The Oshkosh Violet Society is having their 33rd Judged Show and Sale on May 4th and May 5th, and it is in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. There is an annual Judged Show and Sale in Cincinnati, Ohio, the Cincinnati African Violet Society Show and Sale, and it's May 4th and May 5th. The 62nd Annual Show and Sale in West Windsor, New Jersey, the Garden State African Violet Club on May 4th and May 5th. And an annual show and sale in Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada, the Vancouver African Violet and Gesneriid Society on May 4th. All of the details on those events are on the AVSA website, and I will link to them in the show notes. If you are close to any of those locations, I really encourage you to go and take a look and have some fun. Well, it's time to keep moving forward. This has been a little bit of a chopped up episode. I apologize for that. I had no idea it was going to take me that as long as it did to answer the questions that you guys gave me for this week. And as I said already, you'll be hearing more and more in the weeks to come. I think I may have to split it into 2 more weeks. So yay, you guys. Awesome. This is great. But it is time to keep moving forward. So thank you for being here with me this week. One of the things I was going to share with you, and I'm just going to bend over here and get this stuff, because as you can probably tell, I love books. And I don't think you can ever have really too many books, although I do cull mine every now and again and try to downsize a little bit. I did that this week as well. And I received, and I mentioned this before, I received a huge gift from the late Joan Halford. When she was downsizing her home, she sent me from South Africa all of her African Violet books. What a gift, what a tremendous gift. And I kept most of them, and I shared the rest of them with Joyce Stork. So, I mean, you saw earlier today that, oh gosh, I didn't pick this one back up. I'm sorry, you guys. But the Miracle House plant, I mean, this was Barbara Elkins who gave it to Joan, who gave it to me. It's just a wonderful thing to do. You saw a couple of weeks ago, I think I showed you, this is Francine Pillon's book, St. Paulia, beautiful brand new book. I just ordered for myself a birthday gift, a present that's a book that's coming from the UK. I've never seen it. I can hardly wait for it to get here. This is a book from the UK, African Violets, The Complete Guide by Joan Hill and Gwen Goodship. That little chiffon masquerade plant that I have is a Joan Hill hybrid. This was written by Helen Van Pelt Wilson. She was a great mover and shaker in the early days of the African Violet Society of America. So, I mean, I pick a lot of these up, you guys, on eBay. I look for them used. Don't spend a lot of money. This is Rex Dibley's book. This is from the UK as well, Streptocarpus. I believe there is a new edition of this one. I'm going to look for it at National. Maybe I can find it there. The Wild African Violet. This is about the St. Paulia. It's this species book, an interim guide. And really cool. Very cool. This is a book from Japan, which is, I think, really cool because they read books from in the US. To us, it would be the back to the front. But I'm left-handed, so I'm always looking at things from the back to the front. And it's full, and of course, I have no idea what it says, but it's beautiful, and it's got all these wonderful, wonderful pictures and drawings, and It's just a great, great book. And then it shows supplies, everything that's available in Japan. I'm going to hold this up in case my Japanese friend Fluffy Cat is watching, and that she could see this book and maybe she would find it for herself in Japan. I hope you could see it. This is a Russian book. Again, I have no idea what it says, but it is wonderful. And Paul Serrano's on the back cover from the Linden Line Greenhouses. And again, full of gorgeous, wonderful photos. I mean, it is like an encyclopedia of violets, both American and Russian by name. That's really what it is. So this I got at National one year. I think I got it in the auction. You guys who are going to National, gonna love the auction. Don't miss it. This is a book by Nancy Robitaille. I hope I said that right, Nancy. She's Canadian, French Canadian. Insects, Pests, and Diseases of the African Violet Family. Guys, you know, books, I love them. And there are so many that are devoted to our hobby. So besides Growing to Show, and besides the handbook from the AVSA, and besides Joyce and Kent's book, You Can Grow African Violets, you can find a lot of interesting stuff. And you know, sometimes it's interesting even to read the really old books and see what people used to have to do to grow plants. I find it very fascinating. Well, I've talked long enough. Thank you for sticking with me this week on this long episode. I hope that you guys have a wonderful week to come. And I thank you for joining me every week. The podcast, as you know, is available always on the website. It's available from iTunes and also from Blip TV. Thank you for the ratings and star reviews on iTunes. Those are star ratings and reviews on iTunes. Those are so helpful. It gives the podcast more visibility, makes it easier for people to find it. Thank you for sharing the podcast with your friends. And thank you for coming back week after week. I hope that your days are filled with all the things you love. Good growing. I'll see you next time.